Hello and good evening. I'm Melisa Idris. Welcome to Consider This. This is the show where we want you to consider and then reconsider what you know of the news of the day. The Kuala Lumpur Structure Plan 2040 is meant to serve as the overarching planning document for KL. It is intended to set up a framework for spatial planning and development, which will then inform all of the city's development policies and local planning for the next 20 years. Now, after much protest over the lack of stakeholder engagement, gazettement of the draft of the KL Structure Plan has now been delayed till the end of May. So what needs to happen next? Joining me on the show now is Johnson Chung. He is representing the Kuala Lumpur Residents Association Plus, which is a coalition of several groups, including 55 resident associations in KL. KLRA's Plus was one of the groups that had pushed for the delay of the approval of the draft KL Structure Plan. Johnson, thank you for being on the show today. I'm hoping we can begin our conversation. I know there's been quite a fraught background to the draft KL Structure Plan and what's happened over the past few years, but maybe you can begin by giving us a little bit of context, a little bit of history as to what's happened with the draft and the process of public consultation.
Right. Thanks. First of all, thanks, Melissa, for having me. As far as the KL Structure Plan 2040 is concerned, this was tabled or released to the public in 2020. That's like 3 years ago. And in the same year, as far as I know, there were two major groups that gave feedback. One was Safe KL, another loose coalition, and the other was the, I should say, a group of Cheras residents associations together with their MP, YB Tan Kok Wai, which have now evolved into KLRAs Plus because they've included RAs from other areas. Now, what's happened since then is we and they have not heard from DBKL about their feedback until recently. They called for a sort of public engagement session. They call it a SESI town hall. And I believe even this was because there were letters to the Prime Minister, who is also the minister in charge of federal territories, to ask him to postpone his approval before it's gazetted. So they had that, I believe, on the 29th of March at the DBKL Training Center. Unfortunately, during that town hall session, it was more of a one-way traffic. So we had the Datuk Bandar telling us about how great the plan is, it should be supported, and then the consultant Datin, or was it the Datuk Noraida, who's a consultant for the town planning consultant for DBKL, also spoke about it. But when residents gave their comments or asked questions, they didn't get meaningful replies.
Johnson, so I have to ask then, do you feel like the DBKL consultation was not sincere in wanting true stakeholder engagement?
I like to be fair to DBKL. I think they have been operating a certain way, and they go through the process. These are the things that they need to do, or they've been instructed to do. So they're sort of more like ticking off the boxes. I think they want to do their jobs, but I think DBKL or our government, previous to this government, may not have kept up to date as to the best practices in terms of public engagement.
Okay. All right. Why is it important that they engage the public, that they engage KL residents like yourself and the coalition that you represent?
Well, at the risk of stating the obvious, we live in a democracy. We want to be part of what goes on in our own community. We want to be able to contribute in terms of ideas and even our physical efforts to make the city that we live in better for everyone. And this city is not just any city, it's also our capital city. So I think transparency and inclusivity is very, very important for a plan like this, which covers a big place, and it's for the next 20 years. So I think it's very important that the members of the public get involved.
Right. So I understand there was some kind of 50 odd pages of issues, feedback that you had, that one of your coalition had provided after the initial draft plan. Can you just give me some examples? What were some of the issues that you would have liked to see improved in the revised KL structure plan?
Okay, excuse me, Melissa, but I'll have to correct you there. This 50 plus pages didn't come from the Cheras Residents Associations, but it came from Safe KL. Yes, they had much more detailed, feedback to DBKL. I'm just going to refer to their document. Some of the things highlighted were there were lack of clear policy statements, in the sense that because the KL structure plan, once it is adopted and gazetted, it actually becomes policy. But rather than having policy, like statements in the document, they were more broad, aspirational statements, which leaves a lot of room for interpretation, and it could be abused or misused. And then one of the other things that's mentioned in that 50 plus page document is the structure plan for open spaces. Although I don't know whether they mention it specifically, but I can tell you, for example, when it comes to environmental issues, one of them, because I live in Bangsa Maju and Bukit Dinding is very dear to my heart, is the fact that this is hill slopes and hilltop lands, and they are zoned as environmentally sensitive areas. And yet at the same time, you'll see that the huge tracts of land, in fact, more than 200 acres out of about 260 acres is actually zoned for housing. Whilst in the same document, it says this is environmentally sensitive areas, right? And lastly, one of the other things is there's no clear policy statement on the water catchment areas, but I'm sure this is just the tip of the iceberg.
Okay, so do you know what is going to be revised? I think I'm curious to know, because the gazettement of the plan was supposed to have happened but now has been deferred. What would you like to see happen between now and the end of May? That's not very much time. Do you think there will be enough time to address some of the many concerns that have been highlighted?
In a word, no. We don't know what's in the revised plan. That was the whole reason why we put up so much resistance, and we submitted memorandums to the Prime Minister, because we don't know what DBKL has done since the feedback in 2020. And so we are concerned that, like in previous structure plans, they would have received feedback, but what's approved doesn't seem to take it into account. So what really needs to happen now, in our opinion, is that DBKL, number one, needs to release the final draft for the public to review as soon as possible, and then have very systematic, streamlined sessions, public engagement or town hall sessions with the people, ideally thematically, i.e., for example, hill slope developments, traffic, or floods, right? That's thematic. And also for each geographical area, maybe according to the constituencies, right? Like Cheras is one, Segambut is one, so that the public can be engaged and they can give feedback in a very constructive, effective manner.
All right, and you think that there will be sometimes, there could be apathy amongst people, especially when it comes to long-term plans. One of the feedback has always been, well, we're planning for 20 years, but some of the issues that KL dwellers are facing are happening today, floods and congestion and all of that. Do you think that there will be public participation if we push for more consultation by DBKL?
I definitely think so. Well, to be honest, I have only been involved with this group for less than a year, but I have seen so many people come for events that they've organized. They even had a KL sustainability conference recently, and hundreds, maybe 200 people turned up. And these are ordinary people from their respective residents associations. These are not activists or academics and so on. They are just people concerned about the city that they live in. So I think given the chance, people will participate. And of course, having said that, then it becomes incumbent upon the government or DBKL to really promote this and make it known to the public that there is this process going on now. Please jump in. I might also add that the government really should use technology or ICT to enhance participation. Obviously, you can't get thousands of people into a huge hall. Then they have to go through either social media or some kind of CRM platform that they can receive all this information, collate it, analyze it, and then show the public again.
All right. Johnson, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. Johnson Chong, they're representing Kuala Lumpur Residents Association Plus. We're going to take a very quick break here and consider this. We will be back with more. Stay tuned. Welcome back to Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris. Let's continue our discussion about the draft of the KL Structure Plan 2040. It's meant to serve as an overarching planning document for KL, informing the city's development policies and local planning for the next 20 years. This is a very important document. Joining me on the line now, we have Dr Shuhana Shamsuddin. She's the president of the Malaysian Urban Design Association, also known as Perekabandar. She's currently Adjunct Professor of Urban Design at Taylor's University. Dr Shuhana, thank you so much for being on the show today. I want to talk to you a little bit about the way the KL Structure Plan has been handled over the past few years. What does that say to you about the way we plan our cities, we plan KL?
Okay, first of all, thank you, Melisa, for having me in this show. That is a very interesting question because as we are all waiting for the KL Structure Plan 2040 to be actually gazetted, I find it's a blessing in disguise when currently the Prime Minister said, hold on first, we need to stall the gazettement because of some feedbacks that I receive from the stakeholders. And I think it's a very wise decision because once we gazette this structure plan, we're stuck with the policy direction, we're stuck with all the suggestions, and it's very difficult to sometimes rectify what we think should not be done. Most importantly, the structure plan is actually a framework for the development of the cities over a long period. So why we need this plan is because we need to control and guide development towards a certain direction that will be for the betterment of the people, as well as also making the city functional in the sense that you can create jobs, you can have a better economic situation and meeting the needs of the people. And by doing so, it's something that cannot be rushed and cannot be done off the cuff or just by referring to what other people have done to the cities, and then we just like or less copy paste.
Okay, right. So it has to be in line with what we want KL to look like for the next 20 years. I love that you said we cannot rush this because we're going to be stuck with it for the next 20 years. I know that in the first round of public consultation, that initial draft of the KL Structure Plan, that the Malaysian Urban Design Association had submitted feedback. I know a lot of people feel very strongly about some of the issues that were raised. Can you share with us some of the concerns and some of the suggestions that you had made for improvement?
Okay, our main concern as an NGO which champion for good urban design practice is that the care social plan doesn't seem to put forward a certain kind of character or identity for Kuala Lumpur in the future, where all development that will take place will actually going forward towards that direction. Because at the end of the day, when we have a plans with just written statements, tables, diagrams, and maps, we don't really know for sure how are the developments going to take place and what kind of what appearance will the city be in the future with those policies.
What do you mean by an identity for a city? What do you mean by that?
Identity is the quality of being sameness in character and being distinctive, so that we can differentiate one city from another in terms of its townscape, which actually tells its appearance. So we don't want KL to be an anywhere, nowhere city. So that if you take a snapshot of KL, you cannot tell where you are because it looks the same as in any other cities in mostly the developing countries in the world. We want KL to be a city which has its own character, which reflects its culture, the tradition, the heritage, the behavior of the people, the value system, and all these put together with the climate that we have. We cannot be building cities as if we are in the temperate climate because we don't have that kind of climate. So being in a tropical country means we have to embrace the weather, we have to design with the weather, we have to plan with the weather, so that we provide comfort to the people. For what tend to happen now, the KL is planned to be very car centric and adopting an island planning approach whereby the cities are being divided into parcels of land, and all the buildings are actually arranged doing in the parcels, and they are doing their own things without considering how this parcel of land will be connected to the others. I give you an example. For example, if you design the city center into blocks of parcel and they're all surrounded by roads, you can't even walk from one block to another, let alone crossing the block to the other. So it has to be designed to in order for the city to be livable and to provide a quality of life to the people. You must allow them to be accessible, to be walkable, to be able to use other different mode of transportation apart from their cars. Because I see what's happening in KL. Although in the past they have a low carbon policy, footprint and so forth, but on the other hand, we're still building more and more roads and elevated highways into the city, which is actually ripping the communities apart, destroying many vegetations and also breaking up the communities. Recently, we have the PJ community is actually fighting not to have another elevated highway to dissect neighborhood.
Well, yeah, I like that. Thank you for bringing that up, because what often happens is that we only respond as residents of KL, as city dwellers. We tend to respond to development plans once they've been announced, once they've commenced, and it's always a reactive approach. Talk to me about why we need to change this with the KL structure plan, which is for the next 20 years or so. How do we get that right, that the public is involved, is consulted, is engaged, is heard, beyond box ticking of stakeholder consultation?
Actually, this is what the developed country is all about. If you look at the developed country, the public participation is done in a very serious manner, because the public are very vocal about the way the cities have been planned for them. And I have done research, when I was at UTM, I've done lots of research about the situation in Malaysia as far as urban design is concerned as a result of the planning approach that we have. And I benchmark with the developed countries all over the world, like Japan, Australia, UK, US, even our neighbor next door, Singapore. What they have in common is that all these developed countries, they are focusing on the design of the cities for the people. And they're very concerned about what the city can, what kind of quality of life can they provide for the people. And that's why you see in the developed country, the cities are very walkable, and we enjoy going to their cities, isn't it? Because we can walk, we have lots of places to interact, sit down, sip coffee, and so forth. Unlike what we have now, we just have to park our cars at the front of the shop because we're going to walk to the shops and that way. So I in fact interviewed one planner in Durham City Council. It's a historic city, and you see that you can't differentiate between the historic buildings and the new buildings because they blend in. They're so in keeping because the people there love their heritage, their history. They want it to be intact. So he said that if there is one proposal for development, very ugly looking building coming up, he will tell the public, and the public will give an uproar and harass their politicians to make sure this building will not go in unless it respond to the heritage and historic character of the city. So this is how they use the public. The planners use the public in order to actually mediate between what the politicians and sometimes what do you call the private sectors, the developers, money and so forth. They mediate and they use the public in the right way.
So actually, we forget how much autonomy or power we hold and influence we hold as the public, as citizens of cities.
Okay, Melissa, I share another example. Like in Germany, even in 1980s, they already practice advocacy planning, whereby if they want to rehabilitate or to do a urban renewal program in an area, they will set up an office in that place, and they will have their planners, architects, landscape architects in that office that can work with the community. So the committee can come in and then comment, oh, I don't like this plan. Even ask the children to what kind of playground they want in their neighborhood. So the children have given a good, and when they built the playground, and I had the opportunity to visit the playground, it's not the kind of playground that we have here, because children don't like all these swings and these seesaws on these adults design play equipment. They just want something very natural, sandpit, tree house, where they can have a kickabout of the football and so forth. So it's very natural kind of playground because that's what the children really want. So when you do advocacy planning, that means you plan for the people, with the people, you make them more receptible to your plans because they are part. They are involved in the post-decision making.
I really love that. Ask children what they want from the playgrounds which they will be using. That's right. Very, very quickly, Dr. Shuhana, in the minute or so that we have left, can I ask you, from now until the 31st of May, when the structure plan is meant to be gazetted, what would you like to happen?
Well, I don't think much can be. I don't know, because the process of doing the structure plan is very long. Actually, they do have a survey and so forth, and they also committed to certain kind like the SDG, but what I would love to see is that if there is given a chance, we should revisit back the goals of the care structure plan, because at the moment it's very goal oriented, but we cannot see how these goals that they have proposed are related to the problems that we see now in KL, because what's the point of proposing something when some of the problems are still not yet tackled? For example, this very car-centric, this urban sprawl, not walkable, very poor quality of life, very, very, especially for the urban poor quality. There's a lot more problems that need to be resolved. And how are these goals that they have proposed can be done? So revisiting the goals meant that you also have to review back the previous structure plan, KL 2020 structure plan, and see the gap. Has all the goals that has been set in the previous plans been met now? Or are there certain things that still, problems are still persisting? So you have to rectify, you cannot forget about it. So this gap in terms of the, what I would call a goal achievement matrix. You have to analyze the goals that done, but what are you trying to put? Whether they match or not. Whether they're ignoring certain problems that are still persisting, or whether they are continuing certain goals that, and I would suggest a SWOT analysis be done to this structure plan, where you look at the strength of the city, the weaknesses of KL, the opportunities and the threats, and see how this KLSP is actually tackling all this SWOT analysis. And finally, I think the focus group discussion or a roundtable discussion should be done between the consultant, the city hall, and with the vested interest, the parties that is really, really concerned about. I mean, we at Perekabandar would love to be involved in this discussion so that we can, because our role is to champion good urban design practice. We are not there to criticize. We want to help. We want to give ideas. We want to use our expertise to benefit the KL city dwellers. So if
Dr.
there's that
Shuhana,
time, then that would be good. Okay.
thank you so much for speaking with me today. I really appreciate you sharing your passion and your insights. That was Dr. Shuhana Shamsuddin from Perekabandar, wrapping up this episode of Consider This. I'm Melisa Idris, signing off for the evening. Thank you so much for watching, and good night.